Bill, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect. I'm just getting set up. So
Sure. And looking sharp.
I don't know about that, but good deal.
How are things going, Bill?
It's going well. No complaints. Just staying busy, out of trouble. Um, I'm about to do a kitchen project, and I understand permitting's taken a while. So
Ah, yes. Well, if you have any questions, give me a call, shoot me an email, let me know. So, but it all interior or
yeah, it's all interior kitchen, kind of
okay.
rework. So, but there's a little bit of structural, so we'll need some engineering.
Okay. Yeah, that's the
So,
portion that'll probably take the longest.
yep, that's what they were saying. So we're
Well,
all
cool.
good.
Like it. Yeah, no, if you have any questions about anything along the way, please give me a call.
Yeah, I won't be shy. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. And
All
then
right.
just to let everybody know, we are live streaming, so everything is public.
So be on your best behavior and all of that.
Yeah. Um, and then Bill, I don't know if you saw my most recent email. Britta let me know that she's going to be about 15 minutes late.
Okay. And I know Mike is tardy and um, Doris is not able to attend today.
Right. So
Ethan, are we
we
still
should
gonna
still have
have
quorum.
will we have a quorum to start still?
Yes, we should still have quorum to start, as long as nobody else shows up late or is not able to attend. As far as I know, other than what I heard today, everybody's attending, so.
So how many do we need for the quorum?
4. So we should have you, Earl, Jennifer, and David.
Okay.
But if we do start the right-of-way vacation item when a member's not present, and I think this happened with the Kansas last time too, then they won't be able to vote on that agenda item.
Oh, well, I wouldn't mind dragging that out until Britta. Well, I don't know. Hopefully they'll hurry along. It's up to them. The one thing I didn't see in my packet is, did we have minutes?
We did not, because
Okay.
the last time we met was a study session, so there was no minutes to approve. The previous minutes had already been approved.
Okay. All right. Curious. Well, then, I think we'll be into this because do you see any audience participation?
There is nobody signed up for audience participation, so I mean, we'll probably almost jump right into the Three Crest Road, but if an option that you could potentially do if you wanted was maybe switch items 5A and 5B and do the US 285 congestion study first, as long as Paul's good to go with that.
All right.
I mean,
Paul,
I'd
are
be
you?
fine with that. Yeah, there's no presentation or anything associated with it. It's just a discussion for the commission.
Yeah, let's do that just because I think it would be better if we can get more people involved. And I hate it when they show up and then they can't participate because they're too late.
Sure. No, absolutely. I would just, after you call the meeting to order and before you jump into new business, I would just announce that to the
Sure.
audience.
And then how do we do the pledge? Have you guys done that?
I will put up a picture of the flag and
Okay, great.
we can announce it. We'll just talk virtually.
Perfect.
And then Earl and Jennifer are joining right now.
Good evening, Earl.
Hey, guys, how's everybody?
Doing well. How are you
Well.
doing?
Terrific.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Emily. We have so many Emily Blacks because we only have the 2 accounts. I wasn't sure if that was really you or not.
It's really me.
Hello, everybody.
How is everyone?
Hi.
Hey.
Okay, thanks.
So I have 5 straight up.
Yeah, I'm gonna, we're still waiting on David for a quorum to start the meeting, so I'm gonna give him, and actually, speak of the devil, he's right here. He's coming in right now.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I don't see the applicants yet either. I knew they were gonna come.
Yep, yeah, you're right. I don't see them as well. I'm going to give David a call just to make sure he's not having any technical difficulties. He just glitched out. So hold on one moment, please.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Mr. Wyman, we have you on. Was that you?
That was actually me. That was me, Bill.
right.
Just one other thought. I was having some microphone challenges earlier. If we also probably should talk about meeting in person or not. And maybe we could do that while we wait for folks to get here. For the,
That's fine, Chris. We can do that. We were going to do that under staff business,
I
but
know,
we can do
but-
that now.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah, we
just
can do
may
that
buy
now.
some time. Yeah.
So do we have enough here?
Yes,
Ethan, to get
David,
started?
David, are you on?
He's on, but he's muted.
He's on, you're
Yeah, I
muted,
think,
but we see you.
yeah. But we do have a quorum to begin the meeting.
Okay, with that, why don't we start? So I call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on February 8th at 5 o'clock, February 8th, 2022 at 5 o'clock in order. So our first agenda item is roll call. So Ethan,
Olin,
Is on mute.
I think he's on mute. I see him though.
Sorry, present.
Kaplan is absent. Lemaire is absent for the time being. Lucas,
here,
Miles is absent for the time being. Miller
Here.
and Wyman.
Present.
You have a quorum.
terrific. And just for the other members of the commission, we're expecting Britta and Mike a little tardy. So we're going to move a few things around just to buy some time, address a few things until they come. So I want to let you know that. Our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. So Ethan, you have the flag.
And you should be seeing it now.
Perfect. I did see it, but it will come up, I think, in a sec. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag,
United
United
States
States
of
of
America and to the
to the
republic
republic for which it
which
stands,
stands
One
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 nation.
nation, under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice
and
for all.
justice for all. Thank you. Kind of unique doing it on a Zoom call. So, is there any audience participation?
There is nobody signed up for audience participation.
Okay, so we have decided we're going to move to 5B first and then come back to 5A. That will give us hopefully a little time to get two of our commissioners to join us who had other commitments, but will be here shortly. So with that, I think, Paul, I'm looking to you.
Not a problem. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Planning and Zoning Commission. As you saw from your packet materials, there's a US 285 congestion mitigation study underway. And that project team has reached out to the different jurisdictions that basically are adjacent to Hamden, from essentially I-25, but not including I-25, to the west to, Jay, help me out, to Knox Court. Is that right?
Knox Court, yes.
Okay. And I will say I did get some questions from Commissioner Wyman, and I could certainly understand. The staff report was less clear than I guess it could have been related to the role of these volunteers at this stage. And Jay, again, jump in if I misstate something, but at this stage, they're looking for participation from the various appointed officials from those jurisdictions. And it's really like a stakeholder interview more than a separate panel or a separate subcommittee, like best analogy I can think of is like our CAT or something like that. And so rather than make a selection for you all, or we just thought it would be good to bring it to this group for a discussion, and that way you all can select who you would like to be that volunteer. And I'll answer as much as I can related to it. I'll probably ask Jay for a lot of help because he's actually the representative on the technical advisory side. So
So the commitment's really just a 30-minute interview at this point. The team, the project team are representatives from all of the jurisdictions that are part of the study. The study is being done through a Dr. Cog grant. Inglewood is the sponsor for that. The city is a participant. And there'll be, I believe, 3 or 4 public meetings that anybody's welcome to go to. We don't know where those are going to be yet up and down the corridor. But right now it's just a real short commitment to get some input from stakeholders on each of our commissions and boards.
So do we need a volunteer from P&Z? Is that the
Dave,
idea?
they've asked for volunteers for all of our boards and commissions. I guess this board could choose not to have one, but there's no harm in having someone to share your expertise.
Does anyone have an interest in devoting a half hour, you said, to this and participating on behalf of P&Z?
Possibly. This study, any idea how long this is going to take?
The study is supposed to be done by January of 2023.
Okay.
Well, I would have been happy to volunteer, but I'm getting ready to have back surgery on next Tuesday, and I don't know how long I'm going to be out of commission.
Better hear
Hi
that.
guys, this is Britta. I would volunteer for that. I would be interested.
Awesome.
Go for it.
That would be great. Thank you,
Okay.
Britta.
Thank you,
We'll
Britta.
pass your information on to the consultant.
Okay,
And they
great.
will schedule something with you that's convenient on your schedule.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Anything else on this, Paul? Or
Nothing on that, Chair. I would offer if the board is interested in potentially gaining some more time, we can have a discussion related to whether or not this body would like to go back to in person, including a discussion related to masks. And Ethan's going to lead that. But if you're interested in getting some additional time, we are prepared to have that conversation.
Yeah, let's dive into that right now. And I think maybe, Ethan, if you can tell us before you lead us, tell us what the policy is right now as far as the city's concerned.
Yeah, so right now, excuse me, our city policy is that due to the mask mandate being lifted, it is not a requirement to wear masks in City Hall. It is definitely encouraged to wear masks. City staff is still wearing masks and being conscious of social distancing and CDC practices. But it is up to each board or commission to decide if they prefer to wear masks at their meetings and be in person. The staff would look from you guys as a commission on what your preference would be.
Okay. Open for discussion. Anyone want to begin?
I much prefer the in-person meetings to the virtuals. The virtuals are convenient. You can fit them in and so on, but I think a lot is lost by not having us all in the same room
I concur.
without masks.
Whether or not we wear masks or not, that's the comfort. But I just want to get back together and meet in person, and I see no reason why we can't do that. And so, as long as we're in person, I'm comfortable with masks or no masks, whatever the group is most comfortable with. So,
I will just add that.
I also agree.
I'm sorry.
That's Commissioner Miller. Chris, you were going to chime in with something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that City Council has decided to go back to meeting in person. I think everybody recognizes there's a higher level of productivity from the in-person meeting. It's really a matter, I think what City Council was intending was for each board to determine their own individual comfort level with meeting in person or not. Some boards and commissions might have individual members who are more at risk. And so it really is just trying to be responsive on a case-by-case basis instead of a single uniform policy that affects everyone without any understanding of individual circumstances. So it's really a comfort level more than anything.
Is there the option if somebody is not comfortable being in person that they can video conference in like this? Or is it one or the other?
Go ahead, Ethan.
I was gonna say, I believe the preference would be to go one or the other.
That is correct.
Yeah, and I'll say if you're looking for a recommendation from staff, our recommendation would be to go all one format or all another format for a variety of reasons. Some of which is just the technical component, but the other is it's easier to have a discussion if you're all in one format versus another.
Agree. Any other comments, Britta? Do you have any preference one way or the other?
My preference would be in person, and depending on how everybody feels, I'll happily wear a mask, or if nobody cares, then I probably won't.
Right.
But I definitely think in person is the way to go.
And I'm right in line with David and Britta. I think, I don't see a need for a mask, but I'm not going to buck if that's what the majority want, I'm fine with that too. Do we need to take a vote? I think we've all chimed in. Is this a vote or is it just more of this is what we think?
No vote, just more direction of what you guys prefer. So from what we're hearing, it sounds like definitely in person, but masks optional and up to the person. Am I understanding that correct?
I think that's accurate.
The only other
Okay.
thing I would add in is that Ethan will have a chance to speak with members who aren't present on this call. And if there is some concern, Bill, we may reach back out to you to figure out how to handle that.
That's fine.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I think we've addressed this. So now we're looking at the 5A 3 Crest Road. Am I correct on this?
Yes.
That is-
Give me one moment and I will share my screen here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Good evening, Chair Lucas and members of the commission. Before you this evening is a vacation request for a portion of Crest Road. As outlined in the city code, staff is presenting the request to the Planning and Zoning Commission to obtain a recommendation for city council concerning this matter. The owners of 3 Crest Road, Jordan and Kimberly Lacob, are requesting that the city vacate a portion of Crest Road that abuts their property. The Lacobs desire to make permanent improvements to the driveway and landscaping on their property. 3 Crest Road is the sole property that is accessed by the portion of the right-of-way that is the subject of this request. The map shows the portion of the road being requested for vacation. That is the red area that you see on the map. The applicants have met all the requirements outlined in the code. Additionally, that section of the code has been included in your packets if there were any questions as to what the requirements were. Staff has received no written comments concerning this request. Staff has received 2 verbal inquiries from neighbors immediately next to this property. Neither of those residents had any objections. It was more just questions of what was going on. The applicant is seeking a formalized vacation of the city's interest in a portion of Crest Road that only serves their home. The new proposed configuration would enhance the city's ability to maintain Crest Road more efficiently. The current road is difficult to plow and maintain due to the manner in which the right-of-way extends into the corner of the property at 3 Crest Road, making plowing and gravel road maintenance much easier for public works staff, as we have to back down this road to maintain it because there is no cul-de-sac and because the narrowness of the improved portion of the road. Staff is recommending that a condition of approval of the requested vacation that the applicant be responsible for the maintenance of the area outside of the improved road surface within the portion of the Crest Road right-of-way. That maintenance area is the green area that you see outlined on the map that we would request the applicant as part of the vacation be required to maintain that. We're asking for this because the vacation leaves a strip of right-of-way that would make maintenance more difficult than it already is for public works. This would be accomplished through a maintenance agreement that would run in perpetuity with the property. A copy of this agreement has been included in your packets if there's any questions on that. In addition, City Council is authorized to impose reasonable conditions upon the vacation of any right-of-way, including but not limited to the payment of consideration by the landowners receiving benefit from the vacation. The city manager commissioned an appraisal of the proposed vacation as required or permitted in section 11.540 sub B sub 2 of the municipal code, and staff is prepared to provide city council with the relevant information should city council decide to require the applicant to pay consideration as a condition of vacating the subject property. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to City Council approval of the vacation of the city's interest in the 5,728 square feet of Crest Road that is depicted in the petition, conditioned upon the applicant executing a maintenance agreement that will run with the property in perpetuity, along with any other appropriate conditions the commission may find necessary or desirable to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. At this time, the staff will turn it over to the applicant for their short presentation so they can talk to the commission about what they want to do with this property. And then after that, we can answer any questions that the commission may have. Ethan, if you want to put up the landscaping map that was provided.
Yep, I will do that right now. I think you have to stop sharing your screen first, though.
Okay. And Jordan, as soon as he gets that up, you can introduce yourself, and the floor is all yours.
Can
Great,
everybody
thanks.
see that?
Yep.
I can. Great, thanks, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm Jordan Lacob, the homeowner at Three Crest, and been kind of moving along in this process. So I think we're hopefully close to the end of it. I think several of you have been kind of by the road to sort of see what sort of condition it's in today. I was just trying to improve it. It's the one entrance to my lot, and my wife and I would love to improve the appeal and the driveway into the house, and landscape it, make it more interesting, and better reflect the kind of value of the neighborhood. And these are kind of some of the initial drawings from a landscaper on what we were hoping to accomplish. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory after that. I think you guys have all been through the packet and you've seen the different boundaries and kind of what we're planning on doing. But this is a little zoomed in version of it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything else.
Based on this landscape plan, which way is north?
It would be straight up, actually. So this is the road. If it was coming out, the road comes out this way from our driveway. If you can see where the three cars are, that's kind of the existing road that's the city's right now. And it's just to the right of it is where our driveway starts, right there where the hand is.
Okay.
So it would be back out to the fence line, and then it would go back into Crest Road, the dirt part of it that the city maintains at the end of the lot.
Ethan, can you let me share? I think it might be easier to see from the original.
If you've got, that next drawing, the overview from the sky drawing would be.
So if you looked at that other drawing that Jordan just had up, his improvements stop about right here.
Okay.
Even though so there is that small setback, I believe 20 feet for off-street parking, and the design meets that. But you wouldn't see a lot of this back here because there's still this section of Crest Road that is offset and back.
Which leads me to my next question, Jay. I can see why Mr. Lacob would want that area vacated, all of the amenities associated with it, not to mention that it would basically make his lot into a rectangle. That notwithstanding, is there any reason why the city, neither party was interested in perhaps vacating all of Crest Road and going out to the right of way of Cherry Lane Drive? And that way the city could simply maintain Cherry Lane Drive, and it would be one less piece of paper in the file in terms of maintaining that segment outside the amount petitioned for vacation.
Yeah, the same question.
The reason behind that is because of the state law and vacation under the state law, this vacation has been proposed so there are no parallel lines touching, which is why it leaves this small portion. All three homeowners would need to come in together And then the vacation would be divided up evenly between those three homeowners because we would have parallel lines touching three here.
Okay, it's like
and-
it's like a street vacation where one owner gets half the street and the one across the street gets the other half.
Correct. And that,
Okay,
that would be an
Well,
issue because then the lake ups would need an easement or something else, some very strange lot lines, so they would have permanent access to their home.
got it.
Can you explain that a little bit? I didn't understand that whole parallel line business. I mean, so can you just,
So, yeah,
Maybe-
under state law, the vacation under state law, when a public right of way is vacated, say the entire street on this would be vacated,
Mhm.
the property has to be split up between all adjacent property owners. So, here, you see this green line right here?
Mhm.
That is set that way because the Lake Cups wanted to do this vacation more simply and just have them involved instead of all of the neighboring residents. So this strip was left. It will still be public right of way along with this, but the Lake Cups would be required to maintain this because this leaves such an awkward piece. Yeah, it's harder for ownership and paperwork for right of way, but in this case, that's how it was chosen to go forward. by
Yeah,
the,
I get that, but, and I was looking at that piece, that little sliver and whatever, so I don't understand. Is there not a parallel? I don't understand why you just wouldn't just come straight, I mean, oh, because it's not a parallel line, is that why?
No,
I mean,
because this is the actual road right of way all the way out here.
Right,
So there's just corners. Corners can meet, but adjacent parallel lines cannot. Or then the vacation goes to state law and it needs to be split between two property owners. And they would have to want that also, the other property owners, because it
Yeah.
does add square footage to their lot and would raise their taxes.
right. And I guess looking at that little sliver right there, that is one thing when I was looking at Mr. Lacobb's, landscaping map. Right now, there's a whole bunch of, I mean, it's a real thicket of bushes. I'm gathering that those are going to be ripped out. And then actually there will be, and I don't know how far down it goes. I know it goes from his gate down through that little tiny strip right there. So I gather that is all going to be ripped out. And then I think it continues actually on down to Cherry Lane, but I can't remember. I didn't look at that part. I was only looking at the part that was going to be vacated.
Actually, so we're more interested in keeping it because it is actually kind of a nice natural fence in between myself
Right.
and the neighbor, and just kind of landscaping up into the edge of it, just to make it soften it from being like a tall, I don't know what type of plants you would call that, but it, just kind of layering it in there so that it would look better as opposed to just kind of being, overgrowth. So,
So in other words,
Clean the area up, but not take the trees out.
no, the
Right,
trees
so-
trees we would like to keep actually, and then I don't know if they're tall bushes. I don't know what they are made out of, but they, it's kind of a nice natural fence between myself and the neighbor. So we'd like to
No,
keep it.
it is. So in other words, those bushes, which also run along into and next to that thin strip, you're going to leave those.
Yes.
That's Jay, if you're, who's doing that with the pointer?
That's me.
Okay, yeah, now, right there is where I'm talking about. Right there, right there.
Right. Yeah, that would be the area that we would like to. Well, I'd like to leave it all the way down the driveway, just because I think it adds to the, it's natural landscaping.
Because from your landscaping picture, it looked like you were going to clear that out and make parking spaces over in there and on the other side. And
No, there's
I
actually
was just curious.
there's quite a bit of room and kind of a gravelly area in between the edge of the landscaping and then where the old kind of dilapidated pavement is. So once that asphalt is pulled out, there's kind of space over there for some landscaping and kind of parking spot. Because the driveway is actually quite skinny.
Right. And so then, and as Jay
Car
said,
wide.
not only will you be responsible for maintaining the thin green strip, but also out past it beyond down into Cherry Lane there. Okay, good.
So let me ask about the parking spaces. I assume that you have there, are they primarily for visitors that you have, or?
Yes, we have kind of a smaller, well, I mean, we have a roundabout driveway, but people seem to get sort of stuck up in the driveway. And then my friends at Amazon, UPS, and all the other people that come by and deliver things have quite a bit of trouble turning around. So it's just sort of giving people options to, just sort of walk up the driveway and not have to deal with turning around in a small circle. But we're just, kind of either concreting or brick down the driveway. And then both of the two sides will be just kind of crushed stone to kind of give it a natural feel to it. So they're not like a parking spot. I mean, it's a parking area, but it's not a, cemented off parking spot.
And then I take it, I saw where the letters went out to your neighbors within 500 feet. And I think earlier you said no one has responded. And I guess it looks to me like it impacts the property. I'm going to call it to the sort of southeast. Am I right on that?
Yes.
And they're okay with this?
I did not hear from that property owner. I only heard from the north and the west property owners.
And Jay, you said they were more clarifying questions that they asked?
Yeah, neither of them had any concerns. They just wanted a little more information about what was going on.
What other questions does commissioners have? None?
I'm done.
So I'll entertain a motion if anyone wants to make one.
I'll make the motion, Bill. I move to recommend to City Council that the city approve the vacation of the city's right-of-way as depicted in the vacation petition, subject to the condition that the applicant executes a maintenance agreement that will run with the property in perpetuity.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
2 seconds. Any discussion? Well, I guess we move immediately to vote.
Well, no, there can
No?
be a discussion, and I do have
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to ask
Sure.
is that should we, because I noticed that council can decide whether or not there should be compensation based on the appraisal. But is that something that planning and zoning would not opine on or recommend, or not recommend?
No, they could make a recommendation to council. I would suggest keeping it more generic and not saying a price, but saying.
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That you would recommend that the city seek monetary compensation for the vacation.
And
That
just
would
to
be,
clarify,
that would be my recommendation, is that the city does seek monetary compensation consistent with what the city has historically done in the past in similar situations.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
It's always friendly, David.
But Jay's right. If you recall from previous discussions, the code specifically gives that authority to city council, and it's not one of P and Z's findings, any kind of consideration, financial consideration. But Jay is absolutely correct. That doesn't stop you from suggesting to city council that they take that into consideration. So that would probably be the easiest way to handle it.
Okay.
Right, so just to jump in here as well, if the commission wants to recommend that as an additional condition, it should be based on a finding that it would be appropriate and then necessary and desirable to protect the public health, safety, and welfare, to have consideration for the vacation.
Okay, well, like I say, and that's great, obviously, but I was as concerned, if not more concerned, with a consistency with regard to how the city has conducted itself in the past. And I think that that's actually a significant consideration. So Sylvia, what do you got? What do you got about that?
Well, I guess on the basis that it's in the public interest, that city council has found in the past that that's in the public interest.
And welfare.
And welfare, yep. That could be a recommended condition.
So, Sylvia, is it possible to just incorporate the basis for Vice Chair Holen's statements into the motion itself, so that it's not necessarily a separate condition, but instead is folded into the motion that then very clearly conveys to City Council the intent, which is to be consistent with previous vacations? The extra condition worries me a little bit, just from a, how do you approve or deny that condition when there's really nothing to do with it?
Isn't our role primarily advisory and recommendation based? That anything that we make is not binding on city council in any manner whatsoever?
Absolutely.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Right. Well, there is a way to, I mean, the motion could be amended to recommend approval as stated in the packet, and also subject to the condition, and also recommend and follow that with a recommendation to city council to evaluate the need for consideration. That would kind of be a softer way to urge city council to consider that.
Could you go with simply the recommendation or the motion as it stands, and then add on and further recommends that?
Yes.
Fill in the blank. Would that be appropriate, Counselor?
Yes. So recommend that that city council consider requiring compensation and consideration for the vacation. Yep.
Are you getting all this, Ethan?
Consistent with the practices of the city historically.
So what we could add to the existing motion is that city council take into account additional consideration to be consistent with historical city practices. And I can repeat that again if need be.
We probably should have you reread the whole thing since it's been amended, and before we go to a vote.
Sure. So just to be clear, I'm not making the motion because I can't.
Understood. But paraphrase what Commissioner
Right.
Wyman made.
So you as Planning and Zoning Commission would be recommending to City Council that the city approve the vacation of the city's right-of-way as depicted in the vacation petition, subject to the condition that the applicant executes a maintenance agreement that will run with the property in perpetuity, and that City Council take into account additional consideration to be consistent with historical city practices.
What about the two?
Works for me.
Sounds good to me.
Does that work for you too? All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, call for the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. So it passes unanimously. Congratulations.
Great, thank you
Um,
very much.
Thank you for
Jordan,
your
I'll-
time.
I'll be in touch, Jordan.
Thanks, everybody. I'm gonna drop
Appreciate it.
off now.
You bet. Congratulations.
He drops off as it's getting exciting now. So, all right. Next up, I lost my script here.
So, Mr. Chair, we have reports from Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay. I see it. All right, members, city staff. We discussed the mass policy already. Is there anything else?
One update for Planning and Zoning Commission. Last week, City Council voted unanimously to approve the housekeeping amendments that came before you in December, except for one, and it was related to horses and trying to make sure that horses were explicitly allowed as part of our code language. They have continued that one specific one until I think it was April 19th. But essentially, they directed the city to evaluate all of our regulations related to horses and bring them back kind of one chunk, if you will, of horses that aligns with the code prior to 2019. And it's likely, because it was outside of the scope of what you all heard and made a recommendation on, it's likely that you all will hear that and make a recommendation to them on those amendments sometime here in the spring.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul, and I'd heard a little bit about that, and one of the things that I was curious about, because when we were going over all of those, I mean, for the most part, I mean, they were all housekeeping and consistency type of changes, and I remember at one point, I mean, several times we'd sit back and say, hey, have there been any substantive changes to any of the regulations and other than the ones that you pointed out? And so it wasn't clear to me whether this change that some of the horse people were talking about inadvertently got into what we were looking at in our last meeting, or whether it was done, a couple of years ago when a whole host of things were done to the thing and just nobody ever noticed it. But it was because I don't recall at all any discussion where we said, yeah, we're drastically cutting back on what you can do with horses.
No, it's just the short answer. In 2019 with the code modernization,
Right.
and I can get into specifics later if you all are interested, or I can call you tomorrow, whatever. But in 2019, there was no definition for livestock or agricultural livestock. And with the update in 2019, there was those definitions added. And one of them specifically excluded horses. And so the intent of the housekeeping amendments was to allow for the horses. So there was no substantive change. What council was interested in is doing an evaluation and making sure that horses and I shouldn't just limit it to horses, but horses, mules, donkeys, there was even some discussion of bees, but to make sure that the amendment that they approve, regardless of if it's just allowed, they wanted to go beyond just allowing them, I guess I should say. They wanted to do a comprehensive evaluation of horses pre-2019 modernization and what we have today and bring them something that aligns it back to 2019. That's not necessarily to imply that there's other things that have been taken away. It's just they directed us to take a detailed look into it and go the next layer below just returning the ability to have them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other
That's
questions?
it for staff updates.
Perfect. So I don't think there's any other business, is there? then we are ready to adjourn and can move to the next planning. So the planning and zoning is hereby adjourned at 5:45. And then we're now moving on to our study session, correct?
Correct, sir.
Correct.
You are correct, sir.
So I'm looking through my little sheets. I've misordered them. Essentially, we can turn this over, can we not?
I was going to say, Chair
To our
Lucas,
consultants?
with your permission, you can just turn it over and we can take the ball and run with it.
Please do. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, you all should be able to see the presentation now. Well, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of Planning and Zoning Commission. I think we're getting pretty familiar with each other at this point with the number of study sessions we've had since the first of the year. This is the next in that continuation. So welcome. And again, this is really informal. So as we go through these different slides, please feel free to jump in and ask questions or share your thoughts, or because some of the information we're going to talk about tonight is based on feedback we've heard from the CAT, and I know a lot of you were at that last meeting. So please, let's keep it informal. Let's keep it more conversational. Don't feel like you have to wait to the end to jump in. For the agenda this evening, we'll just do a quick peek at the schedule and just remind everybody where we're at in terms of the course of the project. The bulk of the discussion tonight, at least as we have planned right now, is to talk about an outline for the key topics and exercises for the second open house, and some ideas for the second round of community engagement via the survey. Just put on your radar at the end of this conversation, we will want to talk about the date for the next open house. We have a couple of options for Planning and Zoning Commission. And they're in early March, but just put that in the back of your mind for right now. And part of the reason for having the next open house in early March is based on the project schedule. So we're here in February. So we're here at the end of the conceptual kind of approach and concepts for the different chapters. And so the next step in this project is to go back out for that second round of engagement. Both through an open house and then through a community survey that will be online or electronic only. But that allows us to keep our project schedule and stay within our budget. So we talked a little bit about this at the last study session. We also talked about it with the CAT, which is in keeping with what we've heard in terms of, we don't need to reinvent the wheel in terms of a vision statement. Really, it's probably more of a true update and refinement to be more reflective of the 2022 environment as opposed to the 2008 environment. And so that the vision, again, is continuing to evolving. This is a community vision that we'll take to the public in this next round of public input, where we talk about having safe, serene, low-density residential community defined by our open spaces and views, maintain and enhance our established character. Again, not changing anything, but how do we make what we have better? And then one of the things that came out of the CAT discussion was, if you recall previously, there were a couple of statements that kind of talked about what we mean within this vision statement. And the CAT had a good idea of potentially taking those top 10 individual word highlights from that first question in the initial survey and just letting that speak for itself, right? That's what the folks told us as part of the survey results. And when we did that, I'll editorialize for just a second here and say, I think it paints a pretty good picture of what we're trying to achieve. I would call the attention to Planning and Zoning Commission that semi-rural, that phrase is not in here. That has been intentional. I guess I would offer as kind of a first discussion for Planning and Zoning Commission. That's a conscious decision and one that probably warrants some discussion and or kind of sign off from Planning and Zoning Commission before we take that to the general public. So at this point, I'll take my first pause and ask for some feedback from Planning and Zoning Commission on that issue specifically, but then also the larger question of, are we again, this isn't a final version, but are we continuing down this path that you all agree with?
Any thoughts?
I think the deletion of the term semi-rural, it may be a hard sell, but I think it is prudent to remove it because it is so difficult, if not impossible, to define. And it means, I think, a number of different things to different residents of the village. And if you leave it in there, we may wind up getting hung up on it in trying to move this process forward. So it's okay with me. I think that in vision where you've emphasized low density and defined by open space and views, I think that covers some of the area which people probably have in mind when they talk about semi-rural. So not including it as one of the adjectives is okay with me.
I agree with David. I think he articulated it perfectly.
I do too.
Okay. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask just to make sure it's been asked. Is Planning and Zoning still supportive of this approach? And again, it's not a final version, but are you still supportive of this approach and agree with this approach just in terms of big picture of really more of an update to the vision statement and not necessarily a wholesale rewrite?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I thought that would be the answer, but I wanted to make sure we asked the question.
But that's not to say that, you might come to other areas that might not require more writing. But the issue is
Sure.
that if you can build on something that's working, then that makes some sense. And I think just to make sure what we're talking about is we've got the vision, right? And then those adjectives, that's going to be included too, not in the vision statement, but that as words to describe CHV, right? Correct.
Agreed. Yes, that is the current approach, is why we have a statement, but then we have these adjectives that help further describe how we can implement that vision.
And, to that extent, just throwing it out, because, there were a couple of people at the CAT that didn't even like that word serene.
Yes.
And, if you put that back, if you, shove that into adjectives and you just had a safe, low density residential community defined by, that actually tightens it up even more. And it actually is pretty accurate. I'm just saying that that's something that you might want to consider.
I personally, I like that approach. I guess I'd be curious if the other members of the commission have any thoughts. Not that you necessarily have to. I'm just curious if you do. Hearing none.
All right, well, moving
on. So this is where I will turn it over to Brett from Rick Engineering, and he's going to go through kind of the approach and some of the thought process and some of the activities for the open house. And take it away, Brett.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening. So our first station, first off, the community vision is going to be its own station. So what we just covered in terms of the vision, that would be up there as a station for people to, give their thumbs up to or add any edits and so forth. That would be its own station. This would be the second station, the community character station. And for each station, we're going to start out with reviewing and getting feedback from the community regarding the draft set of guiding principles. So this is now, I believe, the third time you've seen this iteration. Most of the text is the same. The second bullet point consolidated a second and third bullet point we had from a previous meeting with you all last month, I believe. So it mentions balancing private property rights with the needs of the community. So again, that word serene's in here. And Earl, we do recall that was a topic of discussion at the CAT. So
And just for some context, this particular station is going to be more of a, do you agree? Do you not disagree? What would you change?
Right.
That kind of stuff. So the interaction with the public at this one is going to be more, I guess, inquisitive in terms of language as opposed to selecting options, I'll say.
And I think, since we're talking about that as well, one of the things, that we want to do as people are moving through and they're saying, hey, do you like this? Do you not like it? Do you like something better? If they say, I don't like that, I like this, we got to try to find out, okay, what is it that you don't like about that? We got to try to get them to be specific, because that feedback actually will be more helpful than just saying, yeah, I don't like that. I'd rather see it this way.
Right.
Just a
I
general
definitely
comment.
agree. So our folks at these stations, that'll be the intent, not just to be there to welcome folks and have them write general vague comments, but really try to drill down when we can.
And I would envision, like on a station like this or the overall vision statement, we'll probably have note cards at that station it's not just a put a dot here or what don't you like or what do you like, but if you have additional comments, please write that down so that we can evaluate that and share it with the commission.
Okay, shall we move on then? Sure. Another, this is a very easy station, as we've mentioned a few times now. The land use station, essentially same sort of input as the community character in terms of, do you agree with this? What would you change slightly? We anticipate that 99% of all comments will say, yeah, you have this exactly right for the land use direction based upon all the input from the survey and open house and so on and so forth.
Again, I don't want to arbitrarily gloss over this, but if you have thoughts on this, share them. Otherwise, we'll move on from this one pretty quickly. Okay.
All right. Transportation. So same setup here, going over the draft guiding principles. So the wording has been tweaked a little bit here and there on some of these bullet points. The first one changed a little bit to now say minimize cut through traffic on village streets and improve resident access to arterial routes. There was some language there in terms of the access, tweaking of that. The second one I think is fairly similar: improve safety and reduce the speed of vehicular and bicycle travel on streets and trails throughout the village. And then the third, reduce conflicts between various modes of travel: vehicular, bike, pedestrian, and equestrian. And while we're here, we should welcome our friend Elliot from FHU. If you want to turn your camera on for the transportation section. Hi, Elliot.
Oh.
Well, good evening. So again, this is really has not changed markedly, but we will have the same exercise here where people will be able to say, yeah, you got it right, or I'd like to change this, and try to get very specific in terms of the changes. Any comment from you, Elliot, or from the group?
I would add that here in just a moment, we're going to have some visuals. This is one of the topics we know we need more input from the public on. And so this is one where there's going to be more than just, to Britt's point, this is what, do you like it? Do you not like it? What would you change? What wouldn't you change? We have some images here we're going to run through with you all, and Britt and Elliot can do a better job of explaining why and what we're trying to tease out. But just as a foreshadow,
Right.
this isn't the only transportation slide. There's I don't know, 4 or 5 here in the slide deck.
Yeah, this is the entree essentially.
Why don't we do all those and then have the discussion about the transportation station overall?
Okay.
Okay, because I was going to just comment with regard to your bullet point. Am I on? Yeah. With regard to your bullet points, and I don't know who you had it attached at the end of this. It didn't say who wrote it. I actually thought that person encapsulated perhaps some of the things that we might want to try to achieve in the plan even better than this. I was pretty impressed with that.
With which
Evidently,
one,
nobody
Ralph?
else was.
Just trying to think back to the text you're referring to, that's all.
Well, like I say, it was attached to our packets. It's Exhibit A.
Well, you mean the memo from Paul?
I don't know who it's from. It just says Exhibit A.
Exhibit A, and then it goes on to a back
Oh,
page.
that's from Alex Brown, I think.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Oh,
Well, no wonder I like it then. I'm always impressed with what Alex says.
well, whoever wrote this raises a number of good points, and I think that he emphasizes I think the biggest component of the transportation issue, which is the cut through traffic. And undoubtedly, there are a number of possible solutions. The question is, which ones of them might be viable? And I think this is an area to which we'll need to pay a lot of attention, because if some of these proposals were to be enacted, it would require not only cooperation, but perhaps even some inconvenience to village residents. This may dampen their enthusiasm for it. Overall, I think that the points raised in this memo are really very good and offer the opportunity for a lot of thinking, and I would even say some tabletop scenarios.
And I agree with what David said. And there are subtleties, which is not surprising if this was Alex. I mean, in other words, rather than, hey, minimize cut through traffic, or, speed limits set at levels that consider safety of non-vehicular traffic along with the traffic, seeking to manage traffic volume at the level generated by residents and property owners. In other words, there's a subtle twist there to kind of move it away towards what we're trying to satisfy our villagers' needs and what our villagers are generating, et cetera, as opposed to sort of from an outward looking aspect. And I was impressed with that. So I'm just saying, and I don't know, maybe that was your point, Chris, you want to come back and talk about it. Maybe I jumped the gun there, but I really liked Alex's, how do we know who wrote it? Alex's points, bullet points.
Well, it could be Alex Brown. It has AGB on the bottom. So
yeah, that's right. But
that
I
figures.
didn't know who that was, but it sounds like him.
I didn't either.
Well, it was. I guess I'll say a couple things. One is we'll take your input at any time. So please don't feel bashful, because it's all good conversation. The other is I agree with you. Being relatively new in the community and still trying to learn the hot button issues, I think that he provides a pretty good take from a resident perspective. What I will say is part of what this next round of input, specifically as it relates to transportation, is if this is your preferred option, are you also willing to accept X, Y, and Z? Right.
Yep.
Right. If we say, speed limit in the village, regardless of where you're at, is 25 miles an hour. Well, that may be inconvenient and result in some tickets for some residents. And are you okay with that? Right. So anybody, again, this is, and I'll flip back and forth through slides as much as I need to. I guess I would say either Britt or Elliot, do you have any initial thoughts or feedback on that? Or do you want me to keep going through these slides?
I'd say we ought to go through the slides and then have a broader discussion.
Okay.
Like Chris suggested.
Okay.
Ellie, is that okay with you?
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing.
Okay. So yes, the guiding principles were an entree. We have a couple different mapping exercises and also some visual alternatives to look at. So this is a mapping exercise. We'd have obviously maps on the tables and so forth, kind of set up the initial community survey, and all the exercises and foreshadowing of survey questions that we'll talk about towards the end all draw from input we heard at the initial open house and the initial community survey, which was voluminous, right? So the opening statement here, the initial community survey indicated support for intersection improvements around the village. We'll have a mapping exercise where attendees can indicate where on the map they would like to see the following tools to improve intersections. So new or improved turn lanes, new traffic or pedestrian crossing signals, and other tools for intersection improvement. So transportation, I'd say, along with parks, those are the two topics here we're going to discuss tonight and for the open house, where we're trying to get a little bit more bifurcation and location specific around the village, because the situations differ so much around different parts of the village. And we heard that in the first survey. So while we're not trying to pin down every single improvement for every block along the way in every city street, we're trying to get some sense of where there's favorability towards certain treatments in different areas of the community. Elliot, anything to add on that?
No, not really. Just again, in that survey question we had asked, we said something about caveating it by saying improvements to intersections in a way that does not induce cut-through traffic. But then we listed some types of things, and roundabouts was even included in one of those, the R word, and nevertheless, I think about 50% of people said yes, they'd be interested in this. So this is directly, okay, there's a lot of interest in something. Let's find out exactly what the interest may be. And we decided to not include a R word bullet in there to and see if maybe someone does raise roundabout or traffic circle.
Shall we move along to the next one? So this one's actually more of an informational board, because people indicated a favorability towards changes to the arterials. And obviously the city does not control the arterials like Hampden and Bellevue and University and so forth. So for this one here, we're going to have information board with information about what the region wide is doing to address these routes. So there's a Hampden Corridor Congestion Management Study that recently began. Cherry Hills Village is one part of that study. And so at this station, we might get comments from the public about what they'd like to see on Hampden. And really the message that is, that's great. We'd love to hear everything you have to say about Hampden. It goes into a larger planning effort with your neighbors in the city of Denver, Inglewood, CDOT, so on and so forth. Also, Greenwood Village is leading a study of improvements at the Bellevue and Fairfax intersection. And we'll note we left off any mention of the I-25 and Bellevue interchange planning, as that's kind of its own separate animal. And it's a little bit further from the village boundaries as well. So this board is essentially informational, but we might get a few comments concerning the regional improvements here at the open house. Paul, we might as well go on to the next one here. Another mapping exercise. So we're going to note, and we discussed this with city staff, that CDOT is currently completing a bike and pedestrian safety study for the Denver area. And so it's obviously articulating improvements for the CDOT roads like University, Bellevue, and Hampden. And so we would have a mapping exercise here where people could indicate where on the map they'd like to see new sidewalk or trail connections along these routes. So this bike and ped safety study has not been, I don't think, terribly highly publicized around the area. But again, this is one of the areas where the city has a voice, a very strong voice at the table. And we want to really just hear from the community concerning specific improvements they'd like to see on these major arterials, because people did indicate desire to really address the arterial improvements out of the first survey.
And I will say Emily's on the meeting as well. And Emily, feel free to chime in if we butcher something or if you want to add something. I will say it's my opinion, and I'll say my opinion, that while CDOT may not choose to make improvements in Cherry Hills Village, it is in the village's best interest to have projects identified and locations identified if and when in the future CDOT does have funds or if there are grant opportunities or things like that. So this is one where we acknowledge that we don't have direct control of these, but this is a way for us to be thoughtful about in the future, if and when funds do become available. We already have these identified, and generally those are favorably viewed when you are talking with these state or federal agencies. So it's my opinion that that's the real benefit, including this in the plan. So.
And Paul, we can go ahead to the street section. So the final element here, the transportation section, is actual examining and have people look at different options for how to address street design. And this really concerns the improvement of safety for people walking and biking. So there's a lot of comments out of the first survey about improving the safety for people walking and biking and for better separation of different modes of travel around the village. And so essentially we'll have these different images, which we'll flip to next, and ask if people are in favor of any of these designs. And if so, where in the village they would like to envision using these designs. So we'll get, we'll move forward here. So we have some various options here, and we may find some other ones before the open house, but this one's a little bit more of a natural look to the separation. This obviously is more of a mountain context, but it could be applied to an area like Cherry Hills Village. Next slide. This is a situation that would call for an actual curb separation between a bike lane and the street pavement. Could it be a little bit of landscaping there in the separation area as well? This is just another treatment option here. This actually separates bicycles from pedestrians on the sidewalk off to the left there. And then moving forward. Elliot, this describes more of a bulb out situation, I believe, right? It's the diagram.
Yeah, it's a way of the up and down street. It's a way to kind of reduce the width of that street at intersections so pedestrians have shorter crossing distance.
Right. Okay. Next slide. This is another example of more of a curb, more of a permanent separation between vehicular traffic and bike traffic. It's concrete. It could be of various widths. It can look a little bit different than this. This is a good example photo. That pole that's sticking up, that is, I think somewhat of an option to have on there. It's not mandatory to have something like that along a street, but it obviously provides some degree of visual, especially at night, for separation. And then moving forward, this example here, Elliot, maybe you can handle this one. The speed tables looks like, right?
Yeah, this is this may have a couple of more extreme things than you would necessarily want in Cherry Hills. Like on the right side, we're actually they're closing the street to two turns, but some speed humps and some striping. It's kind of a shared bike and car type street, kind of more almost European style.
Sorry.
So those are some various images of different treatments we wanted to bring forth. And so, yeah, if you want to just go back towards the beginning, Paul, we can discuss this in its breadth. There's quite a bit of information here and quite a few exercises.
In terms of commentary or suggestions made by the surveys in the open house, the results, the feedback from villagers. If you were to put things in a 1, 2, 3 order, which would be at the top of the list? Would it be bicycle travel, various modes of transportation, or cut through traffic? Which one would top the list?
It's a good question. And Elliot, I don't think we have an exact breakdown of that numerically. I think, to me, having gone through all the details of the survey more than a few times, the separation, the safety issue, I think comes through most strongly. Cut throughs in the background, and it's always going to be an important topic, but the separation element and it really kind of gels with the discussion of safety, which is part of community character. the issues with bike safety, bike separation, bike behavior, those came through in my mind, some of the strongest comments, the strongest input in the survey. Elliot, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and this is partly just from talking to people as well as the survey. I think clearly cut through traffic is the biggest issue, but I think a lot of people think that the village is doing a really good job. The streets are rural and narrow, and you're doing pretty well as far as not inducing cut through traffic by making Quincy and Colorado Boulevard real zippy streets. So it seems like there's a backdrop of concern about the cut through traffic, but not necessarily a demand for major changes. To fight cut through traffic,
Okay, let me be the skunk at the garden party here. This survey and the responses to it also occurred during COVID. And even though COVID was starting to ease off maybe a little bit in the fall, my impression is that traffic was reduced rather substantially, particularly on Quincy, given this COVID era that we've been through in the last 2 years, particularly during morning commute hours. And I'm just wondering whether the absence of that constant annoyance of getting navigating Quincy, particularly during commuter hours, whether that diluted some people's opinions and perhaps then became more focused on the bike safety issue. And maybe that was also a result of COVID, because they were spending more time at home and more time recreating on village trails, et cetera. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I have to wonder whether this colored their opinions. And if we move forward on the basis of those, for want of a better term, colored opinions, the fact that we're moving forward in good faith, we may be going perhaps off on a direction which, as things return to normal, will lose some of its prominence, and the cut through traffic issue will come back to a larger extent. And I realize that is a rather ambiguous and speculative observation, but I don't think you can discount people's opinions in light of the last 2 years. It may have, if you had this survey done 2 years ago, you might have gotten significantly different answers. I don't know that. But I do have some concern there that we have gotten this input in an anomalous period of time.
Well, my first thoughts are that the guiding principles aren't ranked like 1, 2, 3. Bike safety is mentioned as a bullet. It's in one of the bullets. So is cut through traffic. So the content you see here is not, you asked our opinion of what we thought was coming out top. That was our thought. But I don't think the guiding principles are staking a flag in the ground saying, well, cut through traffic's now second place and we're going forward as in that way. That's my read. So I think it's a way, like the master plan will produce recommendations which, as conditions change, the direction and prioritization could change a little bit in the future. But we've seen these major kind of tranches of input come out, and we're responding accordingly. Elliot, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a fair point that we're doing this at one point in time, and as you said, it's an anomalous point in time. Getting back towards normal, but still different. So yeah, I think it's fair that at different times there will be different kind of weightings of the issues. But yeah, I do agree that I think the basic, modest focused improvements that bear in mind not inducing cut through traffic and safety. I think the basic principles are pretty constant. Maybe the weighting among them changes a little bit over time, but I think the basic principles remain valid.
Are there thoughts from others on the group here?
Well, I kind of gave my thoughts before. I mean, I think the principles are good. It's just a question of, is there a better way to state them? I mean, clearly, we're talking about the volume of traffic, the speed of traffic, and the interaction of traffic with other modes of transportation, be it horse, bike, pedestrian, what have you. Those are the things that we're concerned about. The question is, what will be the guiding principles that will help not only future councils make determinations about, but also communicate to the community what it is that, the reasonableness when they're looking at what they want to try to achieve.
So I made a couple of notes, and this might be too vague, but when we were talking at our last, actually I made this at the CAT meeting, these notes, and just really talking about we were talking about these guiding principles and the feedback that we thought. We went back through the survey again, and a couple of notes and how to articulate these things in a way that guides future councils and future planning and zoning, but isn't too specific to avoid things like what you were just talking about, while maybe cut through traffic specifically does become an issue. So just here are the couple of notes that I made, and it was more of just how do we word these things. When we talked about one of our guiding principles as related to transportation that came through was a preference or a priority to non-vehicular traffic at specified locations, and to not default to prioritizing vehicular traffic. And then the other this was just a bullet point that I made on my notes, and was really talking about having controlled traffic that would be on a vehicular basis. So I don't know. These and I understand, guys, you guys are just bulleting these out, but these are very specific. But maybe in the beginning of or in the vision or somewhere, we lay out at a higher level that one of our preferences is towards non-vehicular traffic and minimizing vehicular traffic and having pedestrian traffic and of course all the other forms of traffic flow with that. So it's that's a higher level concept, I guess, but it still is saying we don't want Quincy to become a main thoroughfare. And I've been taking notes all the way along, and at some point I'll probably write up just a couple of more complete sentences that could be put in somewhere as we get further down the road. But and for purposes of using these as stations at the next community feedback meeting, I think these are all work well to continue to gather feedback.
Let me ask you a follow-up to that, because, and I'm more curious than anything else. I think either way would be appropriate, right? So these are the guiding principles for transportation. So when we get into the next level of recommendations and action items, right, we're going to have a whole other list of stuff that's kind of underneath this umbrella of these three. What you're getting at I guess I would ask, I think there's pros and cons. I think there's benefits to both approaches, but I think you could either take that as a higher level item, or you could even make that more specific, right? And say to avoid, right, one of the recommendations to implement one of these guiding principles is to not make the vehicle the dominant mode of traffic. And then you would have action items under that about what are some strategies that we could use to actually make that happen. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, that you have action. If indeed we decide that we don't want the vehicle to be the major mode of transportation, that would be the high level. And then yes, absolutely, you put kind of action item points underneath that, or suggested action item points, because those could change, right? I mean, who knows?
Right. Well, and that's, I don't know if I said it to this group, but I know that I said it to the CAT, is in some ways, the stage that we're at in this process, in a lot of ways, is the hardest stage of this process, because we start having these really good conversations and we start having the discussion of, well, is that a guiding principle? Is it a recommendation? Is it an action strategy? And I don't know that I have a good answer for you on that. But so to get back to Commissioner Wyman's question, I guess I agree. I don't know that it would be fair to prioritize it 1, 2, 3. I think that there were 3 most popular responses to the survey, and I think we can word this differently, but I think in large part that the identification of these 3 guiding principles captures the vast majority of what we heard. Now it's just a matter of, did we hear it correctly, and what specifics did you have in mind, I guess I would say. Because that will then, right, because people will give us comments like, yes, I agree with these, but don't forget about X, Y, and Z, or right, if you're going to minimize cut through traffic on village streets, right, Mansfield's horrible, you need to do something about that, right? I'm making scenarios up, but that's what helps feed us in the next cycle of this, of the next layer of those recommendations and action items. So I guess that would be a really long-winded response to both of the commissioners' thoughts and questions.
And Paul, it sounds like we should go back and examine Alex Brown's writing and make any refinements necessary here to the language.
And I think, again, I think that he has a very unique experience because he's been on council and he's been a village resident for a long time. Again, I read and I have read what he proposed, and I think I agree with Earl. I think he's probably articulated it better than any one of us could. But I still think that the values that come through in his comments are captured in these 3 bullet points. And I think that there's ways to implement what he's got within these 3 broad categories, these guiding principles. That's a personal opinion. And if y'all disagree with me, please tell me. I promise I won't have hurt feelings.
No, I agree with that. I actually thought I said something similar to that. So I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I agree as well. And, it may just be in the, it may just be adding some broader language in the headliner or in the actual guiding principle.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree. And I'm sure that I paraphrased what I read from one of you because, at the CAT meeting, which I thought, and I wrote it down because I thought it was really articulate. So.
Can I raise one other thought that has come up a lot in conversation that I was wondering if you think it should be woven into this somehow, is a sort of positive statement about coordination with CDOT and surrounding communities to kind of support improved traffic flow on the perimeter major arterial streets in order to protect local village streets.
That could be added in here, but it also could be, part of the next layer down too, the action items and so forth. I'm sure that language about cooperation with CDOT will make it in the document no matter what.
Right, but it's to me it's and I think a lot of people have expressed this in our early meetings and the public, that making sure that traffic flows on Hamden and on Bellevue and on University is a real key. It's the, I guess you call it the carrot, not the stick, for minimizing cut through traffic. I don't know. I think it's something that like everyone supports, and it's I don't know. It seems like there are a lot of people who might think that that's a good, strong statement.
Yeah, I see your point there. Other thoughts on that?
Thoughts that might be woven in somehow.
It's certainly more demonstrative. Basically, we're going to be affirmatively working with CDOT to improve these arterial routes, essentially.
Or at least be a stakeholder.
Yeah. I see some head nodding.
I was gonna say, let me just ask the commission, do you all as a body want to have language specifically about coordination with CDOT?
Not necessarily.
I agree.
We can't do much about CDOT. It's here. Two of our boundaries are CDOT controlled, 285 and Bellevue. One of them, a third CDOT aspect goes right through the middle of us, whether we like it or not. To a certain extent, there's not a whole lot we can do if CDOT decrees that this is what that they're going to do X on whatever road. So I think we would probably want to focus more on maximizing the benefits internally. And by internal, I mean on streets other than the 3 controlled by CDOT. And I realize they will not, we cannot accent the benefits on streets which the village has so most control over because they intersect. But to make this a big issue, I don't know if there's much point in that, because we don't have, first of all, we don't have that much weight with CDOT, and second of all, the realities of CDOT's infrastructure are a given. There's nothing we can do about it. About the only one we can perhaps make some noise over would be University, because it goes through the village. But already on that basis, my observation is that the primary amount of traffic on University is automobiles and local deliveries. You don't see a whole lot of semis running through there, except those doing local deliveries, and that of course has a significant effect on traffic patterns. So I would put CDOT in a secondary position.
Well, I guess my comment would be is that more to, and it fits on what David was saying and what we know, they're a limiting factor. Okay, it's not a question of are we going to cooperate with them, but it's a question of, because this document is to guide future councils, but it's also to communicate to our public, to the citizens, and it's a recognition that whatever our guiding principles are, they're going to be limited by CDOT. Okay, which then says by definition, you got to work with them. But I mean, in other words, it's a question of going, hey, don't go thinking that we can just do whatever we want to a large degree. This is a limiting factor. They're in control. And so I'd be more in terms of saying, hey, a line along those lines that communicates that fact, which then implies that obviously you're going to need to work with them. So we don't need to say we're going to work with them, because we've already said, hey, these things that we're going to try to do are obviously limited by the fact that CDOT controls these things.
I guess let me offer this to the group is right, because it's the plan's not just going to be transportation station. Here's our guiding principles, right? There's going to be some text and some explanation of, why these are our guiding principles and how we got there and that kind of stuff. What I'm hearing then is maybe a paragraph that talks about or acknowledges CDOT and the potential constraints and our need to partner with them and all that kind of stuff that helps inform some of the background, but it's maybe not a bullet point as a guiding principle.
Fair enough.
I'm just suggesting that. I'm curious what you all think.
No, that's fine. It's just that we didn't have it in our last master plan. So if you guys feel the need to add it in this one, even though it's kind of logical that we would have to work with CDOT, then by all means, go ahead and add it.
Yeah, if I could take one more shot at putting a little context behind the thought here is, so as I think Britt, you mentioned, we're just starting out a intercity study on Hamden corridor with Englewood and Sheridan and Denver and Cherry Hills and CDOT and RTD all cooperating, doing a plan. Would it be good to have a definitive, and Cherry Hills, I think Jay, I think you're the main Cherry Hills representative on that one. Would it be good for your participation in that study to have some sort of positive kind of official statement of city policy, of village policy that supports, let's do what we can do to maximize traffic capacity and throughput and traffic flow on a street like Hamden as a way to help discourage cut-through traffic on Quincy. So it's not so much, just the mom apple pie, we're going to cooperate with CDOT, but a statement about the importance of making sure that the major arterials that surround Cherry Hills function well as a way to minimize for that key minimize cut-through traffic on village streets. The carrot part of the minimizing cut-through traffic.
And I can say, as somebody who's participated in a lot of those regional activities, it is always more effective if staff can point to community-based policies as a backup or as a support for certain individual policy decisions that might be made in a process like that. So even if it seems obvious, of course we're going to work with CDOT. Well, yes, but it gives us much more ammunition if we've stated some of these seemingly obvious things that we can point to with a policy number and everything else like that.
And that's what I was going to say. Anytime, as Paul stated earlier, we can have statements like that in a master plan where we can talk about regional collaboration, whether it's on state highways or our trail systems regionally. Just the statement itself in the future may help when it comes to grants or when CDOT comes in and says, well, we're gonna, for example, narrow one of these roads and we know it's going to bring more cut through traffic on our local streets, then it's always good to have a policy statement out there that you can point to help your argument in the future.
Okay. So it sounds like we should add something about CDOT in here, kind of teeing off what Jay and Chris have mentioned, and perhaps the explanatory text of the open house station itself as well. Right? Okay. Paul, should we get input on these other mapping tools and so forth?
Yeah. Nope. You let me know when you want me to stop, Brett.
We're kind of going towards the end. Maybe back up to the one before these pictures. Yeah, the street sections one. So reaction from the group here on the street section exercise in terms of, you know, again, not choosing a specific section for a given street, but really getting input from the public, whether they like some of these different ideas and where they would like to see them perhaps explored.
Right, and a little specific background on this is there was a lot of support. In fact, I think the transportation idea that got the most support was looking for ways to better separate bike and ped and equestrian traffic from, or activity from street traffic, and support for that. But it's a little challenging to find ways that kind of appropriate examples that have kind of the rural feel and not a, you know, doesn't look like a Denver, one of these parking separating bike, you know, type facilities. So of semi-rural-ish looking treatment, and ones that are in some fairly constrained rights of way, and ones that meet that are maintainable and that don't mess up Jay's maintenance maintenance activities. So we were trying to find some examples that kind of fit all those categories that were you know, maybe rural looking, maybe fit with kind of the character of Cherry Hills, fit within constrained right of way, and do that separation. So we thought it'd be valuable to see what kind of strikes people as maybe might fit in Cherry Hills.
Paul, if you want to move forward to some of these images, just so they're fresh in folks' minds. And so I think, Ellie, we want to have caveat language at the open house saying these are not exact designs, these are examples, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other thing that I think would be beneficial is a list of potential pros and cons of the different alternatives. Right, and I'll just pick on this one for just a minute. But we were talking with J&J, you can chime in, right? If this is implemented, particularly on the south side of a street, that makes snow removal more difficult, and there may be snow and ice on the trail longer, right? And so there are these trade-offs, and that's why I think it may be a good idea to have some potential pros and cons listed under the different options.
I personally agree with that.
You know, just to chime in on the next one, you went back one, Paul. On this one, is there any, I'm trying to think where this may be relevant. This example in the village where
Yes.
you
Here,
might
here.
have that.
If you
Well,
stretch it away, you could put it at Quincy University, but that's a pretty big stretch.
Well, that's what I was going to say, and Elliot, you can certainly chime in, but right, speed tables primarily.
Did we lose Paul?
I think we lost Paul.
Lost Paul, or he froze up.
Yep, it looks like he froze up for a moment.
They're
I'm gonna
inconvenient for
read it.
slow down and get through them. So I don't really have visual sheets maybe. Oh, my back.
Yep.
That was
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You might turn
Sorry.
your video off if you're having streaming
Yeah.
issues.
I may need to. The point I was trying to make is that, right, that these speed tables are inconvenient for a reason, to get people to slow down. And I don't know that as we sit here today or tonight that we would recommend or even begin to suggest where they may be appropriate. That would be more of asking folks, do you potentially like this? And if you do like it, where do you think it would be most valuable, I guess?
Yeah, the islands in the middle of the intersection, I can't think of any intersections where that would work. We don't have any one-way streets or,
That's what I'm struggling with, Jay, is that I look at that.
it would just make for certain areas where there would only be right or left turns in or out. You would make it very inconvenient. I just can't think of anything off the top of my head.
This was in at least your and my Brit's conversation. I think this was the one that we had on probation, whether we even wanted to show at this meeting. So I don't think anyone would be heartbroken if we were to eliminate this one.
Or crop that one off, crop that
Yeah.
part of it off, perhaps. We could take off the part on the very far right that shows that intersection treatment.
That probably helps.
Yeah. It would essentially leave the speed table or speed hump tool on there. Okay, we'll do that. So fairly quiet group. I mean, are these images making sense? Are you feeling good about showing them as ideas for consideration?
I do like them.
Okay.
I think it gives a variety of alternatives as to what residents could look forward to as a potential option.
Okay, good.
As do I, other than this island one, which for the reasons that have all been just articulated.
Right.
I agree, but to go back to, I forget whose point it was, where you put some caveats on with some of these alternatives.
Right.
Okay.
Well, caveats and pros and cons, which are all legitimate and great things to put on the exhibits for the open house.
Yeah, because if nothing else, I think it helps people refine their thinking, that they see a visual and they think, gee, that's a swell idea. And then they start reading the pros and cons and go,
Right.
okay, it's a swell idea, but.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus the fact that even though we'll have people at the table to explain this stuff, there still may be, if someone's occupied, someone who comes up and just looks at this thing and doesn't know what the heck they're looking at. So language helps in that regard.
Agreed.
Okay.
To Earl's never-ending point, any chance we can get people to understand the consequences or the impacts of their choices is better than just choosing blindly in the dark of the night.
Hear, hear. All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll move on to the next station, parks, trails, recreation, and open space. So a few notes here. This is from the CAT meeting. We have added in the words trails and recreation so that we more directly tie with the actual words used in the 2008 plan. We had basically shortened it to just parks and open space in our revised version, you might recall from a couple meetings ago, but they want the trails and recreation in there, which makes total sense. So that's added in here as well. Then the 3 guiding principles, again, are fairly similar to language you've seen previously. First is preserve, enhance, and expand trails and open space areas. Now, the second one, again, ties closely with input we heard at the first community survey and so forth. Design and preservation of parks, trails, and open spaces will focus on enhancing natural features and the feel of the village. That's the bridge over to the character aspect. And the third one, preservation of open space, trails, and scenic views. So the views comes through from the survey. And again, as a bridge to the character part of the document on public and private lands, including lands owned by institutions. So this lands owned by institutions, that came out of discussion with the CAT. There was a lot of discussion at that meeting about, hey, a lot of folks think a lot of property is official open space, but it's actually part of a school or a golf course. And they wanted to actually test the idea with the community and really have a discussion about the idea that perhaps the village should work with these institutions to preserve these views, preserve the open space in the future, especially in the comments were made from the CAT meeting. What happens 20, 30 years from now when a given institution, moves on or land becomes available? So if I missed anything from the CAT meeting in that discussion, that was one of the larger things coming through from the CAT meeting that we wove in here into the guiding principles.
Right.
So then we have some mapping exercises here. First would be trail related, and Emily's on here. We talked about this with her. A map of the different public trail corridors and having folks place pictures. Essentially, we have little pictures representing, obviously benches, drinking fountains. These are all amenities that, we talked with Emily about, seem to make sense that could be included on various trails around the village, and would actually improve the environment for folks using the facilities. So this one's pretty straightforward. And of course, we have images to represent this. So essentially, we'd have a little square, something like that, and people could write. We also could have some squares that are blank. People could write what they want on that square and put it on a location on a trail. So we're trying to get some guidance on how preferences differ in different areas of the village, how treatments might vary for different types of trails here in the village as well. Next map exercise is actually concerning active park improvements. So there was some interest from a minority of people who took the survey in the active park improvements for families and so forth. And so we'll have some caveat language about that here at the station as well. But we're trying to tease out, where that desire is coming from and where it might make sense in some select locations to talk about some of these improvements. So we're talking about small shelters. The key here is not a big, huge park shelter with 50 people under it. A very small shelter, benches, small playgrounds, not gargantuan ones that are meant to attract the entire metro area, but small playgrounds in an active park setting. Drinking fountains. Note we didn't put any splash pads or other water features. So when we say drinking fountains, it really mean a drinking fountain. We also want the ability for folks, if they have a square, to write some other idea on it and place it on a map of a given park, and also to write nothing, a nothing option, basically a big square saying nothing. So, we're trying to kind of delve deeper into that, suss out that interest we did see in the first round of engagement for at least some exploration of a few active park amenities here and there, and find out where it makes sense. So example images here. So that shelter does have a picnic table under it, but the emphasis on having a small shelter. Bench is obviously pretty straightforward, small playground. And then Paul moved to the next slide, we'll talk about the final. Oh, that's the last one. Okay, so parks and open space discussion points here would again be about the guiding principles, and then the mapping exercises should be interesting to see what folks have to say about that for different areas of the village. And again, it's like the transportation topic and several other topics where we got the sense from the first round of engagement that opinions differ based upon whether you're talking about one end of the village or the other.
So this is Brenna. I want to chime in on this slide. I'm not sure that anything necessarily belongs here for purposes of the open house. And you guys are going to kill me, but a note that I made during CAT as it applies to this guiding principle of preserving, enhancing, and expanding trails, which has also come up as a hot point during the CAT sessions, I think. I just made a note to myself about the cleaning up of easements that are out there in question. And I don't know if it belongs in the master plan or not, but it's certainly, it goes to the point of preserving our trails and potentially expanding. It goes to that whole issue of the trail situation, particularly the ones that are specific to Cherry Hills Village.
And yeah, we had a discussion about that concerning the trails and that whole discussion that came out of the CAT. So we certainly chewed on that internally. And Paul, we had a discussion with Emily about that. Would Emily be best to kind of relay our thoughts?
If she wants to, she certainly can.
Okay.
What I would, I guess what I would expand on is, yes, we've had that conversation, and I think I know there's some work on that that's been done. What I would envision is that being again at kind of the next layer or two, right? In order to preserve and enhance and expand our trails, we need to know what we actually have, what we don't have, where there's potentially confusion or not some clarity. And so I could see an action item or a recommendation, kind of that next cut down of giving direction to do that, and probably doing that in the short term, whatever that ends up meaning.
Yep, perfect. That's where I would see it as well. And my sense is it's another one of those good things that's just good to put out there.
Sure.
So we have put out there that this is something that is significant and something that we are aware of and something that we are, it's a priority. But I agree, it should go in the next layer. I just wanted to bring it up while I was thinking of it.
No, and I'll say, not just for this topic, but for any, is always feel free to do that, right? Because we don't want to inadvertently forget something or leave something out. So if we can keep it in the forefront, please do that.
Okay, I'll keep that one in the forefront.
There you go.
The other thing I'd mention, we're going to talk about some categories for online survey questions. There's one that alludes to this topic about the vagaries and trying to get a clarification. We'll cover that towards the end, just so you know. So otherwise, input on the mapping exercises. It will be interesting to see what we get out of this in terms of, some things which aren't necessarily that active, like benches and drinking fountains. So people want to see those around some of the parks, and where. Or we might get a whole lot of nothing boxes all over the place, right?
And then is there another question that goes on this category that is related to just allocating funds to parks and trails? Circling back to the discussion that we had a couple meetings ago about the Highline Canal Conservancy and kind of some of those things that will be pending in the future that the city potentially needs to be looking at fund allocation for. I don't know. I'm asking.
So I would say the likely answer to that is yes, but we'll need to get further along with the study that's currently underway that's specific to the Highline before we can really have a better understanding of what that text might look like and or say. Right? Because we could always just repeat the language that's in the Highline plan, but personally, I feel like this should go a step further than that in terms of guidance. but we won't know a lot about that until we get a little further along in that other study. That's my personal opinion.
So setting the High Line aside though, is there a place at the open house or to ask a broader question about how supportive people are of allocating city money to parks and trails? Because we don't ask that in here anywhere. We say, what would you like to have? But we don't say, would you like to pay for it?
Yes, the Earl question. Are you going to pay for this stuff, right?
The challenging thing on this particular topic, I mean, I think we could apply that logic to a lot of these categories, a lot of these chapters. Parks happens to have its own dedicated funding source, a dedicated funding fund, if you will. And so we will be able to, allocate money towards many of these items, if only like the High Line, for example. I think, Britta, that the thing to keep in mind with that kind of direction is as we get later in this process, one of the last exercises that you will do is prioritizing all the things that make it through this filtering process. And, is this a short-term priority, a medium-term priority, a long-term priority? Yes, it's important, but it's not urgent. That's really what's going to give direction to city council as they leverage their purse book on how to, what should we be spending money on and what should we not? So, and that will have public input as well. So I don't think we're not quite ready for that conversation just yet because we still don't know what's going to make it through to the other side. But
Okay.
it's really the relativity to everything else that I think will be so helpful.
Okay. Yep. Got it. So what I'm hearing is I'm jumping way ahead. I should slow down.
What I heard you say is we all agree exactly with what you said. It's just how does it fit in?
Yep.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
yeah, I agree with everything Chris said. We're bridging from like the general input, which was village wide out of the first round of engagement, first survey, trying to get down a little bit more down to the ground, obviously, locationally, different parts of the village. And as he alluded to, there's still a third and final round of engagement where that prioritization, even with the public, will come into discussion more.
Great. Sounds good. I'll keep my notes.
Keep taking your notes, yes.
And please keep sharing them.
Yes.
Any other thoughts on this one before we move on? Okay.
All right. Infrastructure. Okay. So guiding principles here. We've done some rewording coming out of the CAT discussion here. This first one here, instead of the village, suggesting the village itself would help with consolidation, we added the word expertise. So the village will provide its expertise to infrastructure districts seeking to consolidate in order to improve services for residents. So the village is not going to actually, actually do it itself, but actually would provide its expertise. We're trying to clarify that. The second one, we added the word feasible. This one was concerning improvement of telecommunication services around the village. The word feasible came in based upon the CAT discussion. So the village will consider feasible strategies to improve telecommunication services around the village. And, there'll be more details about that in the lower layer here, action items, things like that. Third one here, the village will work with other regional partners. We essentially broke the last two here were previously, I think, combined, drainage and floodplain. We broke them into two different parts here. The first one, the village will work with other regional partners and guide private property owners to resolve drainage issues. So in other words, the village is not actually going to be resolving, but will be working in consort with other partners. And then the fourth one is kind of a given, but it's still a guiding principle. The village will enforce floodplain regulations. And then I think, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, we don't have any exercises for that. That's the main activity at the open house, is really input on the guiding principles. Now, when we get to the survey questions, the online survey, there are some questions concerning infrastructure and sustainability. So sustainability and resiliency, again, we've added the word resiliency to this term and to this station. These three here, first one, the village will pursue strategies to enhance resiliency through education with residents and coordination with regional partners. So it's the education aspect coming out of the last CAT discussion. The second one hasn't changed too terribly much, but it's the city will explore ways to reduce the environmental impact of its operations and services, including the use of renewable energy sources. And then the third one was trying to be a little more demonstrative. The village, coming out of the CAT discussion, the village should pursue, instead of just encourage resident participation, the village should pursue incentives and other programs to increase resident participation in environmental efforts such as green building and recycling. So we tried to get a little more demonstrative on some of these here coming out of the CAT discussion. And then Paul, if you move forward, I don't think there's any exercise for this one. Right. But we will note here, we will have an open station for just general comments, additional comments, kind of an open-ended station in that regard. And that came from the chair of the CAT, actually. Great idea.
Yeah.
So shall we pause on these last few? The guiding principles mainly? If you want to backtrack a couple slides there, we can give them a second to look at it again.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Those are the stations. So we're going to the draft question categories. Paul, do you want to tee this up in terms of our process to arrive at the survey questions?
Sure. So, right, per the contract we have with Rick and the scope and the feed and the commitments we've made, we are going to do a second community survey. The scope and the budget for the project anticipate an electronic only version of the survey. So that will be the primary format. Now there's ways we can get creative about making that easy for folks, and we certainly will do that. But really, to Britt's point earlier, the first survey was citywide, and it was intentionally very broad and asked some questions that we thought we knew the answer to, but we needed to confirm that what we thought was actually true. The intent of the second survey is to really get down to that next level on a topic or chapter by chapter basis, and really start to plant the seed and tell folks, there's, at the end of this, we're going to have to prioritize these things. We can't do it all at once. And so we, the project team and Planning and Zoning Commission specifically, need some feedback, and intentionally some direct feedback in terms of prioritization on these different areas of these different chapters. So, for example, and so these are obviously not the full question. They're what the premise of the question is. And then we would fill in, we being Rick and staff would fill in the rest of this. And our intention is to, based on our conversation tonight, part of why we don't have the rest of these questions is we wanted to get y'all's feedback. But then the intention would be for us to finish filling in these questions and send them to you, Planning and Zoning Commission, electronically, and have you give me your red lines and your feedback that we then can incorporate to the final version of the questions. So, for example, which aspects of a safe community are most important to you? Obviously, there's more to that question in terms of A, B, C, D, none, other, whatever. But really the point of this is to one, inform you of the approach, and two, is tell you what our thoughts are in terms of the second half of the question, and make sure that we aren't out in left field, so that when you get that full document, you're not going, well, that's not what I had in mind.
Right. The other thing I'd add here, if some of you've been probably skimming the screen while Paul's been chatting about it, a lot of these questions, especially in community character, tee off of the interesting finds we found out of the first survey and the voluminous input we received from the community, right? It's trying to delve into defining some of these things a little bit better. What does it mean? What does the word safe mean? Because that was a predominant term. We talked a lot about that at the CAT. And a lot of these come out of CAT discussion, actually, from last month. There was a lot of discussion about what do people really mean by safe, right? There was discussion about the safe word.
Right.
What do they mean by natural, right? And so we're not going to, go spin around 15 times in a circle to really discuss the term natural. We're trying to get some discussion from the community about what that means, what that might really do in shaping the direction of the plan. The view corridors, that was a key topic. So, let's talk about that. Which view corridors are most important? Trees was a major thing that came out of the first survey. Really, we all saw that from day one of the results. So we want to kind of test some strategies to preserve trees or increase the canopy. And then the last one's a little bit more of, I wouldn't say grenade, but it's a more intriguing question. Some people have raised the question about the size of homes, and it came from the character section of the first survey. We're putting the question out there. Would you be interested in exploring those regulations to actually limit the size of homes or limit the size of residential lots? We may very well get a response that's 90% no. It'll be interesting to see what we get.
Minor point on limiting the size of residential lots. Isn't that already addressed by zoning?
We have a minimum lot size, but we do not have a maximum lot size.
Okay.
So the concern that we've heard is folks either buy an enormous lot or they accumulate 2 or 3 lots that really function as one lot, right? And there are communities out there that say if you're in the R1 zone district, your minimum lot size is 2.5 acres and your maximum lot size is 5 acres.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not unusual to see communities put limits on the size of lots. Not saying you have to do that, but it's a common planning tool.
And to Britt's point, the responses to this may be no way, right? We may get a similar response as we got to the land use question is, why are you even asking this?
But we thought there was enough smoke there. We got to see if there's any smoldering going on with this topic, essentially.
Okay, I would think that if people are desirous of open space, that if someone has a very large lot, that would be considered a plus rather than a minus. But
Yeah, because it's positive for the view corridors and what have you.
yeah,
But the interesting thing, and I guess you could say this about all of these questions, but you could certainly say it about this one. My guess is that, and we're all hoping we'll have more attendance and more diverse attendance at the second meeting than we had at the first, and conversely at the third. But it's going to skew towards those people that don't have those lots and aren't in the process of trying to get them. So you already know how that question is going to be, I think, by who's going to attend these meetings.
Well, again, this is for the survey questions. So this will be available online. And while
I'm sorry. Yeah.
And, and while I don't think the city is anticipating mailing out copies to every single household, we certainly, Paul, would expect that it would be highly publicized through online channels. And so we would still hope to get
that's
a
good
lot
point.
of yeah. You're right that the attendees is a certain sample size and does skew, certainly skew
demographic. Right.
Yeah.
But I would
Well,
reiterate,
it'll
that's
also
the
be
importance
skewed.
of why we do an open house and a survey, right? Is
Right.
multiple opportunities.
Right.
It will also be skewed by those who are really motivated about this stuff.
Right.
Generally.
Okay, move on. So this came out of the CAT discussion as well. there was the whole discussion about what do we really people mean by cut through traffic. And so the options there might be, hey, it's the east-west routes that are alternatives to Bellevue and Hamden, or the north-south routes, trying to get folks to nail down what do they really mean when they say cut through traffic. It could mean all the above, but we're going to have some options here that allow people to really identify more clearly what they mean by the term.
Are you going to cite specific streets in this instance? Or are you just going to leave it open?
No, it'd have specific streets. For example, one option might be streets like Quincy, Quincy, for example, to avoid Hamden and Bellevue. Or you would say another option is the north-south streets, Colorado and Holly, to avoid University and I-25, right? We're basically giving you the options here verbally tonight. The third one we were thinking was, hey, there actually are some neighborhood streets like Mansfield that people use as a cut through. So it's not just these collectors, but it's sometimes cut through our neighborhood streets.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see if people think that's actually the bigger hot button topic.
Okay.
All right. Second one, options to improve safety where trails intersect streets. So we don't have the images on the screen, but there are some. This will be one where we have some visuals. So there's things like hawk signals.
We'll include those visuals when we send you the language too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's tools like improved signage. There's speed limit, electronic speed limit signs, or things that monitor your speed and flash what the speed you're going on your bike, for example. There's what they call the hawk signals, which is a industry term for those signals you press the button to get the signal to flash red for you to cross the street, things like that. And there may be a few other ones that, Elliot, you guys dig up as well. Okay, parks, trails, recreation, and open space. So on transportation and parks, a lot of the exercise is actually in that mapping realm we talked about already, but there are a couple questions here for parks, trails, and recreation. This is the one I foreshadowed earlier about the trail discussion. Would you favor signage or related improvements to remove confusion about where public trails exist? I can also say one thing that came out after the CAT when we were talking with the city staff is that there may not be as many instances where people are trying to vacate city trails left and right as perhaps people are imagining. But we definitely want to have the option out there and get input on whether we should really more strongly, remove any vagueness, remove any confusion about where these trails exist.
And just to give some context to the commission, we're in the process right now with PTRC of renaming all of the existing bridle trails. So right now, if anyone's not familiar, they have a 4-digit number on them, and that's how our trail system is shown. So we're in the process of going through and naming trails that create a loop or connect you from from John Mead Park to Woody Hollow. We'll have a Woody Hollow trail. So we're hoping to complete that process by the end of this year. So hopefully that will remove a lot of the perception and confusion about some of our trails.
Right. So a lot of this is already, as Paul mentioned earlier, in process. Yeah. The next one actually ties with that one of the guiding principles of parks and open space. And it's an intriguing question. Would you favor the master plan guiding future land uses on institutional properties? And we'll probably need to add a definition of what we mean by that, right? To preserve open spaces. It is an intriguing question because, often community plans or zoning or whatnot, if you have a school, it's just colored as a blue public institutional and you leave it alone, right?
Yeah, except that in the case of Cherry Hills, you have a school which is called Kent Denver, and are probably the largest property owner in the town.
Right.
So that does make a difference. To
Exactly.
a lesser extent, maybe on St. Mary's. Other areas or other institutions would include the country clubs. And I know that the question has been, thrown out on the table more as a discussion, more as a wild notion than anything which was imminent, is what if Kent Denver one day decides to close up shop because the developer has offered them $100 million for their land.
Right.
What do we do then?
Right.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
That was actually a question that came up directly from a discussion we had at the CAT meeting last time.
Yeah. This came out straight from the cap.
Well, I missed that one, so I didn't hear.
No, but I'm saying there is, I don't want to say fear, that feels too strong, but there is a concern by more than a handful of people that scenario exists.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And the golf courses are important to know. The two, I think there's two in Cherry Hills. I don't know if those would ever go away. They're pretty deeply rooted, but around the country, you're seeing, in fairly affluent suburban communities, actually, golf courses coming in and saying, guess what? We want to do mixed use, high density development. And it causes quite the fracas. So this actually could be a way for the community to articulate its vision a little more strongly in that regard too.
And my question is, how is this harmonious with our current regulations and municipal code? I mean, can we even do this? Can we even ask this without it conflicting?
Good question from a legal perspective.
I would say,
I mean, all these questions we have to think about in terms of, does it run parallel with our code? Does it conflict? I mean, it's not as simple as, oh, the master plan says this, so let's do it.
Well, things don't have to necessarily totally align with what's in a code right now when looking at long-term plans like this. A lot of times communities will develop a community plan, comprehensive plan, master plan, whatever you call it, and it will call for changes to the code. So there's that aspect where you don't have to necessarily perfectly align. Now, from a legal perspective, we're not changing the zoning if the master plan makes some language about preferences for certain land uses. It doesn't actually change the underlying zoning at that point. That's a follow-on exercise. But I'll yield to Paul, who has his head more in the code, I think, on a regular basis.
no, you gave the short version of what I was going to say is, right, the master plan's a guiding policy document. And there's oftentimes where a community flat out recognizes that the master plan is in conflict with their code, and the master plan will recommend amending the code for that. Now, is that something that this community has an appetite for? I have no idea. But until we ask the question, we don't know if it's even worth pursuing or not. And if it is worth pursuing, what strategies are available to do it, and how forceful or how, I guess, direct, I would say, would we want to be about it?
Okay, so for our open house, are these institutional representatives, members who represent these institutions, are they going to be also present, or is it just residential?
They'll be invited. And I will say that we have our technical advisory group, right, which includes Kent and St. Mary's and the golf courses and all that. They will be invited to participate in the survey and provide feedback like any other property owner.
Okay, I just want to make sure that they also have a period of notice and comment as well when it comes to the development of this master plan. So
by all means. And we've already met with the technical group once, and they're all aware of what's going on. Paul, right?
Yeah, and just in all candor, our discussion with them, the one that participated the most was probably Kent Denver, and they know that this issue is on the city's radar.
okay, I mean, that's fine, but Kent may be the largest property owner, but we also have churches. I just want to make sure that, we're not conflicting with our current code and creating more drama outside of what the residents are concerned with primarily, because we have this question.
Well, and I think this highlights, right, you all lived the Denver First applications, right, and wanting to go from parking to residential lots.
Yeah,
I get calls from other churches in the community that are interested in selling their property for residential development. So it is a topic that there would be benefit having some direction in our master plan related to.
okay.
But to your point, Jen, I do think we need to be cognizant that we can't just say the city will require, for it to never change, and for it to, if it does change, it goes straight to open space. That's not going to be realistic.
Be fun, I wouldn't.
Well, and also, as Paul alluded to, it'll be interesting to see how the responses come in on this one. There may be less appetite than you think.
Yeah.
All right, infrastructure. First one, which options would you favor to improve telecommunications in the village? So we were talking about that today with Jay. I think we're still working on what those options will be to put out there. But one, Paul, I think we could mention was the one we talked about. It's been difficult to get cell phone companies to increase their service in the village. So would the city be willing to actually step out and actually facilitate helping to put towers up, right? That's one of the major options. And there could be a couple other ones, but perhaps I'll yield to you and to Jay on this one.
No, I would just say, right, we hear on a daily basis, and we heard through the survey, and I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but cell service in the village is not the same quality as it is in other places. And historically, at least my understanding is that a lot of the providers have been less hesitant to make significant investment in the village, just because their return on investment isn't as great as it is in some other areas. And so are there things that we, the city, can do, either regulatorily or through incentives or through partnerships, grants, right? Are there things like that we can do that would make it more attractive for cell providers to provide better service?
And I think we need to look at the other side of it. Do you want cell service worse than you want view corridors? Because cell service is going to be more cell towers, and the cell towers have to go where the cell towers are going to get the best use and are viable. So they're not going to be tucked away. They're going to be right down all of our rights of ways. So it's one of those where we have to mention the balance again.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that, Jay. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, thank you both. Second question, which option would you favor to improve stormwater management in the village? So those options may include, one option may really describe, it's not really the term regional detention facilities, but it's really the idea of having detention areas or ponds that would serve a number of homes at one time, as opposed to every home having their own detention service. The second one might be the city actually levying fees to fund stormwater management on a citywide basis. So that's a pretty direct option there. And there could be one or two other ones as well. So it's delving a little more directly. We had a question similar to that in the first survey. This is actually kind of getting down to here's the specific things that the village could do as options.
Yeah.
So moving on.
And giving people the opportunity, I'll call it, to prioritize those different opportunities.
Right. Okay, finally, draft questions for sustainability and resiliency. So the first two actually we originally has one kind of question. We broke into two parts. One, would you be in favor of the village using incentives to improve water conservation? So this is actually the carrot, and there is a trade-off there in terms of a financial cost to the village, of course. Second one is more of the stick. Would you be in favor of the village using regulations to improve water conservation? And the third one, options for reducing the environmental footprint of the village. That could involve things like options for residential commercial recycling or composting, and also incentives for green building, things like that. But you'll see the detailed options when we send you the draft, of course. Any comments on those?
I think on the first two, in terms of water conservation, I think Denver Water is going to do most of that for us, simply with pricing.
It's never going to get cheaper, right?
No, it isn't.
Right. So just to reiterate what Paul mentioned, just in terms of the schedule, which segue to the last slide here. We've shown you the different categories here. We'll of course give you all a chance to electronically chime in and certainly bleed all over the page you want to electronically in order to keep the process moving forward here with our kind of our scope of activities. We would see that as an online input on the questions, and certainly you can reach out to us directly if you'd like to. But in order to move forward with the open house here, we're still seeing early March. We need to move fairly quickly on the questions over the next week.
Yeah, and to segue into that, I would like to have a discussion with planning and zoning about the date for the next open house. Late February just doesn't give us enough time to get things put together and adequately give people notice and that kind of stuff. So it is going to be early March, and we have 3 days that are identified, and we're looking for what works best for this group, understanding that any one person may not be able to make any one day. So the dates that we had in mind would be Wednesday, March 2nd, Thursday, March 3rd, or Monday, March 7th. And I can walk you through why those dates work. Essentially, we don't like to have these kinds of open houses on Fridays because people have a lot going on. Monday isn't always ideal, but at least it's the start of the week, and generally folks don't have a long weekend usually comes on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, not a Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And so that could be feasible. One of the drivers for those 3 dates is the next CAT meeting is scheduled for March 9th. And we want to be able to have a discussion, understanding we're not going to have all the details sifted through, but we want to be able to have a discussion with the CAT on the 9th about the second open house. And with the open house, we would also want to roll out or make available this next survey. And so that would give us some time to finalize, give us, the collective us on this chat this evening, some time to actually put that all together. So those were the 3 dates that we had identified. I will also say that we would like to stay away from much later in March, because then you start to get into the spring break season and folks are gonna have trips planned and all that kind of stuff. I did do a quick look at spring breaks for Cherry Creek schools and for St. Mary's and Kent, and all of theirs are after that week of the 7th. So that's why those 2 weeks were identified, and that's why those 3 dates were identified. So I guess I would open it up for commission discussion on those 3 dates.
Does the 9th, with a meeting on the 9th, with an open house on the 7th, give you enough time to aggregate the comments and data in order to, pardon my language, coherently inform the meeting on the 9th?
So my response to that, and Brett, I'll look to you to give further clarity. Obviously, if we had it on the 7th and then we had the CAT on the 9th, we are not going to have the details all sifted through and presented, in a formal fashion. But one of the things we could do with them is give them the preliminary feedback, and as an exercise with them, help go through that information and start the process of what did we hear at the open house.
Yeah, a few comments. So one, the exercises we talked about, the mapping exercises, all that stuff's going to be a physical, map with people putting squares of pictures and whatnot on there. So we'll have at least, I guess there were 3 different mapping type exercises, maybe even 4, if I lost my count, from that meeting if it's on the 7th, right? That'll be fresh off the press, fresh kind of stuff. We could be around a table and look at it and really we can decipher that ourselves in the 2 days between the open house and that meeting, but it's also a great opportunity for people to actually see the stuff right there and there, fresh from the open house. We would have time certainly within 2 days to really glean the initial takeaways from everything we heard, comments from the open house. It would be a work in progress. The other thing to note is that the online survey, it's not intended to be out just for like 3 days right around the open house. My expectation has always been it would be open for a bit longer, into March, for example.
I would imagine we'd do at least a month, at
Right.
least.
Right. So it'd be just like survey responses that were coming in, say, in October and November. It still would be a bit of a work in progress. I can also tell you, as someone who's been doing this a while, that once you get even, let's say there's a survey question with 10 questions and they're ABC type stuff, it's amazing how even after the first 30 or 40 question or responses you get, the results don't seem to change a ton as you go through, unless you get some new entrant of a whole distinct demographic group, like we went and met with the high schools and they all said something totally different. In general, the initial survey responses will tend to follow through. So again, we're not saying we're going to have all the responses, but we'll have a lot of intriguing stuff to talk about tonight. Sorry for the long-winded answer. Does that help, Commissioner Wyman?
A little bit. Follow-up question. If it were held the week earlier, would it make much difference then?
Well, you'd have a few more days. You'd essentially have the weekend plus a few more days. I mean, it would help a little, but the benefit of doing it on the 7th is that we're now at February 8th right now. You'd have that much more time to get the word out about the meeting.
Yeah. When do you figure on setting out the next survey?
Well, I'll let Paul chime in as well. Our intent was really to get a draft of the survey out to you, I think, by the end of this week. And then,
Okay.
Paul, I think we would think by sometime next week, we'd want to get responses back from this group and then
Right.
iterate it. So probably be, probably wouldn't go live until the week leading up to that open house, I would think. But over the course of the next 2 weeks, we'd want to get it pretty solid. And then just really at that point, be in the process of getting it ready to be put online.
Yeah, my initial thought on my target for that has been right around the 1st of March.
Yeah.
So it may be a couple days earlier, it may be a couple days later, but right around the 1st of March.
Okay, so basically after Pres weekend holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have enough time, to really get good input from you all and to prepare it for that target time. Thoughts from others?
My preference would be for March 7th for the second open house.
Yeah.
Let me ask it this way. Does anyone have an objection to March 7th?
No.
Well, the only thing I was gonna say is March 7th would be the best for me. It gives me the best chance of being there, but I may not make it anyway. So, but I certainly won't make those first or second or third or whatever you talked about.
Well, if no one has an objection to March 7th, we will make it March 7th. So been declared.
Excellent.
Okay. Chair Lucas, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, that is all we have for you this evening. Like I said, we will be in touch probably later this week with some additional details. But as always, feel free to reach out with anything you got for us.
Will do. Well done. Thank you very much.
It was a lot to
Thank you all.
get through, so thank you
It
all for your
was.
engagement tonight.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks all. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.